You're about to hear a story that feels like it belongs on the big screen, yet it captures the terrifying reality faced by far too many innocent people. Picture a man who holds the power to sign life-altering warrants, a pillar of the justice system, suddenly stripped of his dignity on a rain-slicked highway by a police officer who believed his badge gave him the authority to act as judge, jury, and executioner. Officer Colton Briggs thought he was simply taking down another criminal when he planted an ounce of cocaine in the back seat of a luxury sedan. He had no idea that the man behind the wheel was Federal District Judge Elias Thorne, the very judge who authorizes search warrants for Briggs's precinct and whose name sat on the shortlist for a seat on the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. This is the story of a wrongful arrest, a profound reckoning, and the extraordinary moment when the justice system finally turned its gaze inward to hold one of its own accountable. The rain lashed down on Interstate 94, pounding the asphalt and blurring the Chicago skyline into a wash of gray and orange hues. Inside the quiet cabin of his Genesis G90, Judge Elias Thorne savored the insulated silence that only wealth could afford. He was a man of precise habits. The seat heater hummed at level 2. The climate control held steady at a comfortable 70 degrees. And through the premium, Bang & Olufsen speakers came the measured narration of a biography about Thurgood Marshall. He wasn't driving fast. He almost never did. The law wasn't merely his profession. It was his guiding principle, one he upheld with the quiet conviction of someone who had dedicated his life to it. Tonight he was exhausted. A complex RICO trial involving the vice lords had just concluded in his courtroom at the Dirksen Federal Building, and delivering the jury instructions had taken hours. All he wanted was to get home to his wife, Lena, in Hyde Park. Then, without warning, flashing lights erupted in his rearview mirror. Thorne let out a deep sigh, heavy with the fatigue of a long day. He glanced at his speedometer. 54 in a 55 zone. His lane position was perfect, centered and steady. He tapped the brake, signaled his intention, and guided the large black sedan onto the shoulder. The gravel crunched beneath the tires as rain hammered against the windshield. In the patrol car behind him, Officer Colton Briggs sat chewing on a toothpick that had long since lost its flavor. Briggs had been on the force for some time, a self-proclaimed street-hardened veteran who the department's internal reviews flagged as a liability. He was heavy-set, his neck bulging over his collar, and his eyes constantly searched for the next target. "What do we have here, Briggs?" asked Rookie Officer Harper Quinn from the passenger seat. She was still new, fresh from the academy, her idealism intact but her nerves on edge. "Black G90? Tinted windows, fresh plates," Briggs grunted, punching the license plate into the mobile data computer. "Probably some drug dealer heading back to the South Side. These guys love their Korean luxury cars these days. Think it makes them look like legitimate businessmen." Quinn leaned closer to the screen. "Says here the car is registered to a corporation, Thorne Legal Group." "Shell company," Briggs dismissed with a wave. "Laundered money, watch this." He didn't wait for confirmation from dispatch. He shoved the door open, stepped out into the rain without bothering to put on his hat, and adjusted his belt. Briggs liked the rain. He thought it added to his intimidating presence. He tapped his body camera, not to activate it, but to make sure the lens was blocked by the tactical pouch on his vest, a trick he had refined over time. From inside the Genesis, Thorne watched the officer approach in the side mirror. He did exactly what he had always taught his own sons to do during a traffic stop. Turned on the dome light, rolled down the window, placed both hands visibly on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, and avoided any sudden movements. Briggs reached the window and shone his powerful maglite straight into Thorne's eyes, momentarily blinding him. "License and registration," he barked. There was no polite greeting, no "Good evening, Officer Briggs with the Chicago PD." "Good evening, officer." Thorne replied, his voice a deep, commanding baritone that had filled courtrooms for years. May I reach into my glove box for the registration? My wallet is in my breast pocket. Don't tell me what you're going to do. Just hand over the ID. Briggs snapped, leaning in so close that rain dripped from his nose onto the pristine interior of the luxury car. You been drinking tonight? I have not. Your eyes look glassy to me. It's late, officer. I'm tired. I've been working. Briggs let out a short, mocking laugh. Working? In a suit like that at this hour? What corner you working? Selling dope or running numbers? Thorne stiffened. The insult was crude, outdated, and laced with danger. Slowly, he reached into his jacket and withdrew his leather wallet, offering his driver's license. It was an ordinary Illinois license, not his judicial identification. He kept that separate precisely to avoid any appearance of seeking special treatment during routine stops. Briggs snatched the card. Elias Thorne. Yeah, okay. Step out of the car, Elias. For what reason, officer? Thorne asked, his hands tightening slightly on the wheel. I wasn't speeding. I haven't committed any moving violation. I smell marijuana, Briggs lied. It was the oldest tactic in the book, the easy way to bypass Fourth Amendment protections. Step out of the vehicle now, or I'll drag you out. Inside the patrol car, Officer Quinn watched with a growing frown. She hadn't smelled anything, and the windows had been up. But she was the rookie, and Briggs was her field training officer. You didn't question the FTO. Thorne took a steadying breath. He knew the relevant case law. Pennsylvania versus Mims allowed an officer to order a driver out for safety reasons. He also knew Rodriguez versus United States, which prohibited extending a stop without reasonable suspicion. But he also understood that on a dark, rain-swept highway, legal precedents offered little protection against a bullet. I am complying, Thorne said clearly. He unbuckled his seatbelt, opened the door, and stepped out into the downpour. The rain immediately soaked through his tailored suit. Briggs grabbed his arm, spun him around, and slammed him against the side of the G90. Spread 'em, he growled, kicking Thorne's ankles apart. He conducted a rough pat-down, his hands lingering aggressively near Thorne's pockets, searching for anything that could justify his actions. Officer, Thorne said, his face pressed against the cold, wet metal of his own car. You are making a mistake. I am a federal district. I don't care if you're the king of some fantasy land. Briggs interrupted, shoving Thorne's face harder into the car. Shut your mouth. You're resisting. I am not resisting, Thorne replied calmly, even as his heart hammered in his chest. Harper, Briggs shouted back to the cruiser. Get the cuffs. We got a fighter here. Quinn scrambled out, fumbling with her equipment. He's fighting? She asked, confused. The man had been standing perfectly still. He tensed up, Briggs said with a wink. That's assault on an officer in my book. Cuff him and put him in the back. I'm searching the vehicle. Thorne closed his eyes as the cold steel of the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. He didn't struggle. He didn't cry out. Instead, he began committing to memory the badge number, 4922, the name tag Briggs, the Dodge Charger, and the plate number MP8921. He was no longer just a driver pulled over on the highway. He was a judge mentally preparing his case, and the defendant was standing right in front of him. Thorne sat in the back of the police cruiser, the hard plastic seat digging painfully into his back. The cage smelled of old vomit and harsh disinfectant. Through the rain-streaked plexiglass, he had an unobstructed view of his civil rights being violated. Officer Colton Briggs was tearing through the Genesis like a man on a mission. He wasn't looking for registration papers. He was conducting a full search, tossing everything. Legal briefs from the center console flew into the back seat. The glove box was yanked open. Briggs was growing frustrated. He had expected to find a gun, a stack of cash, something to validate the drug dealer story he had already constructed in his mind. But the car was spotless, almost unnervingly so. Just a few legal documents, a lint roller, a bottle of water, Clean, Briggs muttered, digging under the passenger seat. Too clean. He stood up, wiped rain from his face, and glanced back at the cruiser. Quinn stood by the rear door, looking uneasy. "You find anything, Briggs?" she called out, her voice barely carrying over the wind. "Just a minute," Briggs shouted back. He turned his back to her, using his broad frame to block her view. Reaching into a hidden pocket in his tactical vest, behind his spare magazine, his fingers closed around a small sandwich bag. Inside were several grams of powdered drywall mixed with a bit of methamphetamine he had seized from a user weeks earlier and never logged into evidence. He called it his insurance policy. Leaning back into the Genesis, he lifted the floor mat on the rear passenger side and tucked the baggie halfway underneath, leaving just the corner visible. "Got you," he whispered to himself. He pulled his head out and waved Quinn over. "Quinn, witness this." She jogged over, rain plastering her hair to her forehead. "What is it?" "Look what our choir boy was hiding," Briggs said, shining his flashlight on the floor mat. "Bingo. That's an ounce. Easy. Felony possession with intent." Quinn peered into the car. She saw the baggie. Her stomach twisted. She hadn't seen him discover it. She had only seen him point to it. The implication was unmistakable. "Are you sure that was there?" she asked, her voice trembling. Briggs spun on her, his face inches from hers. "What did you say?" I didn't see it when I looked in the window earlier." "That's because you're a rookie, and you don't know where to look," Briggs hissed. "I found it. You're witnessing it. That's the chain of custody. Don't start getting cold feet now, Harper. You want to be a real cop or a social worker. Write it up. 10 to 15 grams. Suspect in custody for possession with intent. It doesn't look like that much. It's whatever I say it is until the lab weighs it. Bag it." Briggs marched back to the cruiser and yanked open the back door. Thorne looked up at him, his expression unreadable. Well, Elias," Briggs smirked, leaning in, his breath sour with stale coffee and malice. "Looks like you're in a lot of trouble. We found a substantial amount of narcotics under your seat." Thorne didn't blink. He didn't panic. His gaze shifted from Briggs' eyes to the officer's body camera. He noticed the obstruction, the pouch flap covering the lens. "Officer Briggs," Thorne said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Is your body camera active?" Briggs touched his chest. "Oh, it's on. Don't you worry. It caught everything." "Good," Thorne replied, "because I would hate for there to be any ambiguity about what just happened." "Save the lawyer talk for your public defender," Briggs laughed. "You're heading to the 11th District. Hope you like cheese sandwiches." He slammed the door and climbed into the driver's seat, keying the radio. "Dispatch, 4, David 20, 1 in custody, transporting to 11th, possession with intent, tow the vehicle." 10-4, 4, David 20. The dispatcher crackled back as they pulled away, leaving the expensive car, abandoned on the shoulder for the tow truck. Thorne closed his eyes. He wasn't praying. He was planning. He now knew exactly who Colton Briggs was. He had seen the name on a warrant application, a no-knock raid request that Thorne had rejected because the probable cause was too weak. Briggs hadn't recognized the judge, but the judge remembered the sloppy paperwork. Briggs had just framed a man who had the personal cell phone number of the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. But Thorne stayed silent. Revealing his identity now might cause Briggs to panic, and a panicked officer on a dark highway could turn a false arrest into something far worse. "They reached for my gun," they would claim. "He lunged." No, the safest place for Elias Thorne right now was a holding cell, because holding cells had cameras that Briggs couldn't disable. "You're quiet back there," Briggs taunted, watching Thorne in the rearview mirror as they merged onto the highway. "Realizing your life is over." "I'm merely contemplating the law," Thorne replied softly. "Yeah, which law is that?" 18 U.S. Code, Section 242. Thorne recited, the numbers flowing like scripture. Deprivation of rights under color of law. It carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment if kidnapping is involved, and since you have unlawfully seized my person and are transporting me against my will, we are dangerously close to that definition." Briggs laughed so hard he slapped the steering wheel. "Listen to this guy. We got a legal eagle back here." Harper Quinn didn't laugh. She stared out the window, her hands shaking in her lap. She had the sickening feeling that they had just driven off a cliff and hadn't yet hit the bottom. The booking room at the 11th District Station was a brutal assault on the senses. It reeked of bleach, unwashed bodies, and quiet despair. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh light on scuffed linoleum floors where countless lives had shattered. Officer Colton Briggs marched Elias Thorne through the heavy steel doors with a swagger that filled the room. He gripped Thorne's upper arm tightly enough to leave bruises, parading his catch past other officers like a hunter displaying a trophy. "What you got there, Briggs? Another stray?" asked Sergeant Raymond Holt from behind the high desk. Holt was a veteran with weary eyes that had seen too much. He tapped a pen against a stack of paperwork. "Big fish, Sarge," Briggs bragged, shoving Thorne toward the counter. "Felony possession with intent to distribute. Caught him in a fancy G90, probably moving product for the gangster disciples." Thorne stood tall despite the handcuffs biting into his wrists. His suit was ruined, soaked with rain and streaked with road grime, yet his posture remained impeccable. He met Sergeant Holt's gaze with a calm, piercing intensity that immediately unsettled the veteran officer. "Name?" Holt asked, looking down at his computer. "Elias B. Thorne," Briggs answered for him. "And he's a talker, quotes law codes, thinks he's Perry Mason." Holt typed the name. He paused. He squinted at the screen. Then he looked up at Thorne. Really looked at him. He took in the tailored suit, the manicured hands, the precise knot of the tie, and the face. A face he had seen in newspapers, a face he had seen on the news during major corruption trials. Holt's stomach turned to ice. "Take the cuffs off," he said quietly. Briggs blinked. "What?" "I said take the cuffs off, Briggs, now." "Sarge, you serious? This guy's a felon. I found an ounce of powder under his seat." "You don't uncuff a felon until he's in the cell." Holt stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The room fell silent. Other officers stopped what they were doing. "Do you know who this man is?" "Yeah. A drug dealer named Elias. This is the Honorable Elias Thorne," Holt said, his voice rising. "United States District Judge for the Northern District of Illinois. He is the man who signs your federal warrants. He is the man who put the Latin King's leadership in Supermax." The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the hum of the vending machine in the hallway. Briggs scoffed. "I don't care if he's the Pope. I found drugs in his car. No one is above the law. Right, Sarge?" "You absolute idiot," Holt whispered. He turned to Thorne. "Your Honor, I apologize. I don't know what's happening here, but—" "Sergeant Holt, is it?" Thorne spoke for the first time since entering the station. His voice was calm, authoritative, and utterly chilling. "I would like my handcuffs removed. I would like to be processed exactly by the book. I want my mugshot taken. I want my fingerprints logged. I want every single step of this arrest documented. Do not treat me special. Treat me exactly as Officer Briggs intended. Treat everyone as you were treating me now." Holt hesitated. "Judge, we can call the captain. We can fix this." "You cannot fix this," Thorne said coldly. "The crime has already been committed. Now we are simply establishing the evidence. Process me." Briggs let out a nervous laugh. "See, he's bluffing. He's dirty, Sarge. Judges get dirty too. I caught him. I'm a hero." Holt looked at Briggs with pure disgust. "Quinn!" he barked at the rookie shrinking into the corner. "Uncuff him. Fingerprint him. Put him in holding cell 1. Alone. Get him a coffee, a chair, whatever he wants. Quinn rushed forward, her hands shaking so badly she dropped the key twice before unlocking the cuffs. Thorne rubbed his wrists, revealing deep red indentations. "Thank you, Officer Quinn," he said softly. "You may proceed." For the next period, the 11th District Station operated in a state of low-level panic. Thorne went through the booking process with dignified silence. He pressed his fingers onto the glass scanner. He stood against the height chart. The flash fired. The mugshot of federal judge Elias Thorne, disheveled, wet, staring into the camera with the burning eyes of a man who had witnessed profound injustice, was digitized and uploaded to the server. As he was led to the holding cell, Thorne stopped and turned to Briggs, who was leaning against a filing cabinet trying to appear unbothered, but sweating profusely. "Officer Briggs," Thorne said, "you mentioned earlier that you have a nose for criminals." "Yeah," Briggs sneered, though his voice cracked. "I do." "Then you should smell the fear in this room," Thorne replied, "because it isn't coming from me." The cell door clanged shut. Thorne sat on the metal bench. He didn't sleep. He waited. He knew the phone call he would make, and he knew that when morning came, the storm that would hit Chicago would make the rain outside seem like a gentle drizzle. The phone call didn't go to a bail bondsman. It went to Dominic Vale. Dominic "the Shark" Vale was a senior partner at Vale, Sterling and Cooper. He was a man who wore expensive suits and considered any settlement under several $1 million a failure. He had been Thorne's roommate at Harvard Law. "Elias," Vale's voice was groggy. "Everything okay? Is it Lena?" "I am currently incarcerated at the 11th District Station," Thorne said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I have been arrested for possession with intent to distribute cocaine." There was a long silence on the other end. Then the rustle of sheets and the sound of feet hitting the floor. "Say that again." "Officer Colton Briggs, badge 4922. He planted it, Dominic. I watched him do it, and I am going to destroy him. I want you to represent me, and I want you to bring the entire firm." "I'm on my way," Vale said, his voice sharpening into steel. "Don't say a word to them, not one word." The 11th District was under siege. Captain Quentin Doyle, the station commander, had been dragged from bed by a frantic call from Sergeant Holt. He stormed into the station wearing a tracksuit with a coat thrown over it, his face a mask of fury. He marched straight to the interrogation room, where they were holding Briggs. "What did you do?" Doyle screamed, slamming his fist onto the table. Briggs jumped. "Cap, I'm telling you the guy is dirty," Doyle roared, veins bulging in his neck. "That is Judge Elias Thorne. Do you know who that is? He's the most respected jurist in the state. He's on the short list for the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. You think he's dealing ounces of stepped-on coke on the side? Maybe he's an addict, you don't know." Doyle stared at him. He knew. Every cop in the room knew. The body camera malfunction was the hallmark of a dirty stop. "And you, Quinn." Doyle spun to the rookie. Harper Quinn was sitting in the corner, crying. She looked up, her eyes red. "I know you didn't plant the drugs," Doyle said. "I saw your face. You were scared. You were a rookie following a field training officer you thought was God. But now you have a choice. You can be the loyal partner who goes to federal prison for conspiracy, or you can be the witness who saves her career." Quinn looked up, tears streaming. He keeps a ledger." Doyle froze. "What?" "Briggs. He keeps a ledger in his locker at the gym. Not the station locker, his private gym in Lincoln Park. He bragged about it once when he was drunk. He calls it his scoreboard. He writes down the names of the people he jams up and what he took from them. Money, jewelry, drugs. He keeps the drugs. He calls it the recycle bin." Quinn whispered, looking around as if Briggs might appear. "He keeps the stuff he confiscates off the books, then uses it to plant on the next guy who gives him attitude. It's a cycle. Doyle sat back, a slow exhale escaping his lips. He writes it down. The arrogance. He thinks he's untouchable. He was, Quinn said, until he pulled over the wrong car. The raid on Briggs's locker at Ironworks Gym was executed by the FBI. They didn't knock. They used bolt cutters. Inside the rusted metal locker, beneath a pile of sweaty gym clothes, they found a black composition notebook. And inside a duffel bag, they found the candy shop. Different baggies of cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl, along with unregistered handguns, drop guns, and cash bundled in rubber bands. The notebook was the nail in the coffin. It was written in Briggs's frantic handwriting. The big one. Gotcha. It wasn't just evidence. It was a confession. The city of Chicago saw the ledger and panicked. The city attorney, a slick man named Preston Cole, no relation to anyone famous, called Dominic Vale immediately. "We want to settle," Cole said over the phone. "We'll vacate the arrest. We'll offer the judge millions for his trouble, and we'll force Briggs to resign." Dominic Vale put the phone on speaker so Thorne could hear. Thorne leaned over the desk. "Mr. Cole, this is Elias Thorne. Judge, good to hear your voice. Look, we want to put this behind us." "Millions?" Thorne interrupted. "That is an insult. Not to me, to the taxpayers, Mr. Cole. That's a standard payout for a wrongful arrest. This is not a wrongful arrest. This is a criminal enterprise, operating under the banner of the Chicago Police Department. You are not just settling with me. You are going to settle with Jamal Ellis. You are going to settle with every single name in that black notebook." "There are names?" Cole choked. "We can't. That would bankrupt the liability fund." "Then you better start selling some assets," Thorne said, "because I am filing a Section 1983 civil rights lawsuit, and I'm asking for millions for myself and a class action pool for the victims. And I'm not settling for a resignation. I want him in prison." "We can't control the criminal prosecution, Judge. You know that." "Then get out of the way," Thorne said. "See you in court." The criminal trial of United States versus Colton Briggs began. It was the trial of the century for Chicago. The Dirksen Federal Building was surrounded by news vans from every major network. The charges were deprivation of rights under color of law under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, possession with intent to distribute, and obstruction of justice. Because Thorne was a federal judge in that very district, the case had to be reassigned to a visiting judge from the Southern District of New York to ensure impartiality. They brought in Judge Sophia Lang, a woman known for her precise and incisive rulings. The courtroom was packed. In the front row sat Lena Thorne holding her husband's hand. Behind them sat Jamal Ellis, wearing a new suit Thorne had bought him. Behind him, dozens of other men and women. The scoreboard survivors filled the pews. Colton Briggs sat at the defense table. He looked smaller than he had that night in the rain. He wore a cheap gray suit that fit poorly. He had shaved his head. He no longer looked like a monster. He looked like a cornered rat. His defense attorney was Julian Shaw, a high-priced lawyer paid for by the Fraternal Order of Police. Shaw's strategy was simple: attack the victim. The U.S. attorney, a sharp woman named Ava Moreno, laid out the case methodically. She showed the jury the dashboard footage. She showed them the ledger. She put Harper Quinn on the stand. Quinn wept through her testimony, but she held firm. "He told me to witness it," Quinn told the jury. "He said, 'It's whatever I say it is.' He told me that if I didn't back him up, I was a social worker, not a cop." "And did you see the drugs before Officer Briggs pointed them out?" Moreno asked. "No, the car was clean. When it was Shaw's turn, he went on the offensive. He didn't attack Quinn. He attacked Thorne. He called Thorne to the stand." Thorne walked to the witness box, took the oath, and sat down, looking completely at ease. This was his arena. "Judge Thorne," Shaw began, pacing in front of the jury box. "You are a powerful man, aren't you?" "I'm a public servant," Thorne corrected. "You have friends in high places. You didn't like being pulled over that night, did you? You felt disrespected." "I felt threatened," Thorne said calmly. "You told the officer you were a judge immediately, trying to use your influence." "I identified myself because I wanted him to know that I understood the law he was violating." Shaw scoffed. "Isn't it true, Judge, that you have a history of being soft on crime, that you have dismissed cases against drug dealers before?" "Objection," Moreno shouted. "Relevance goes to bias, Your Honor," Shaw argued. "The witness has a vendetta against police officers." "Sustained," Judge Lang ruled. "Move on, Mr. Shaw." Shaw leaned in toward the witness stand. "You claim Officer Briggs planted those drugs. But isn't it possible, Judge, that someone else put them in your car? Maybe a defendant you let off easy, and Officer Briggs was just doing his job." Thorne leaned forward. The microphone amplified his deep voice. "Mr. Shaw, I drive a car that is vacuumed weekly. I am a federal judge who is under constant threat assessment. No one enters my vehicle but me and my wife. The idea that a bag of drywall dust and methamphetamine, which matches the batch Officer Briggs seized previously, magically appeared under my seat at the exact moment he needed an arrest, creates a mathematical improbability that, in your profession, is called reasonable doubt. But in this courtroom, we call it a lie." The jury looked at Shaw. He had lost them. But the final nail wasn't the ledger. It was the technology. The prosecution called their final witness, Dr. Adrian Moss, a digital forensics expert from the FBI. "Dr. Moss," Moreno asked, "you analyzed Officer Briggs's body camera. The defense claims it was malfunctioning. Is that true?" "No," Moss said, adjusting his glasses. "The lens was obstructed by a pouch flap. However, the microphone was not. And the defense claims the camera wasn't recording during the search." "That is technically true. The officer did not hit the record button until after he claimed to find the drugs." Briggs's face went gray. He grabbed his lawyer's arm. Shaw looked confused. He hadn't known this. "However," Moss continued, pulling up a clip, "Axon body cameras have a feature called pre-event buffering. They are always recording a loop of video and audio before the button is pressed. When you hit record, it saves that previous period. We were able to enhance the audio from that buffer." "Would you like to hear it?" Moreno asked. "Please," she said. The courtroom fell deathly silent. Moss played the clip. Static, rain noise, heavy breathing, then the sound of rustling plastic. Then Briggs's voice, clear as a bell, muttering to himself. "All right, Your Honor. Let's see how you like this rock. Boom. Got you." Then a zipper sound. Then shouting. "Quinn, witness this." The audio cut off. The silence in the courtroom was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a career, a life, and a defense strategy disintegrating in an instant. Briggs put his head in his hands. The jury deliberated for only a short time. When they returned, the foreman, a retired schoolteacher, didn't look at Briggs. "In the matter of the United States versus Colton Briggs, on count 1, deprivation of rights under color of law, we find the defendant guilty. On count 2, possession with intent to distribute, guilty. On count 3, obstruction of justice, guilty." Judge Lang looked at Briggs. "The defendant will be remanded to custody immediately. Sentencing will follow." As the marshals moved in to cuff Briggs, using the same steel cuffs he had once used on so many others, he looked back at the gallery. He locked eyes with Thorne. Thorne didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply nodded once. A quiet acknowledgement that justice had been served. While the criminal trial sent Briggs to prison, the civil suit dismantled the system that had enabled him. Dominic Vale and Elias Thorne utilized a Monell claim, proving that the city of Chicago had a pattern and practice of ignoring complaints against officers like Briggs. They proved the city knew Briggs was dirty and did nothing because his arrest numbers were high. The jury in the civil trial was furious. They awarded Elias Thorne millions in compensatory damages and millions in punitive damages. But Thorne didn't keep the money. At a press conference on the steps of the courthouse, Thorne stood before a sea of microphones. "Millions," Thorne said. "That is the price the jury put on my dignity. But dignity cannot be bought, so I am announcing today the formation of the Thorne Ellis Justice Initiative." He gestured to Jamal Ellis, who stood beside him. "This money will be used to fund a legal defense team specifically for victims of police misconduct. It will pay for the college tuition of Jamal Ellis, who will be returning to engineering school this fall, and it will pay for the appeals of every single person in Colton Briggs's ledger." The crowd cheered. Jamal wiped a tear from his eye. At sentencing, Judge Lang peered over her glasses at Briggs. "Mr. Briggs, you took an oath. You used your badge as a shield to commit crimes and a sword to destroy lives. You did not just break the law, you broke the public's trust. And for that, the punishment must be severe. I sentence you to years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole." As Briggs was led away in chains, he passed Thorne one last time. "It isn't fair," Briggs muttered. Thorne looked at him. "Fairness is a concept for the innocent, Mr. Briggs. For the guilty, we have justice." In the time that followed the rain-soaked night on Interstate 94, the city of Chicago moved on, as cities always do. But the scar left by the Thorne versus City of Chicago case remained visible, a constant reminder to those who carried a badge. The auditorium at the University of Illinois Chicago buzzed with the restless energy of proud families. On the stage, the dean of the College of Engineering approached the podium. "Jamal Marcus Ellis," the dean announced. A roar went up from the front row. It wasn't polite applause. It was a thunderous, defiant celebration. Jamal Ellis walked across the stage, his gown flowing behind him, a gold honor cord draped around his neck. He shook the dean's hand, accepted his diploma, and looked out into the crowd. He didn't look for his parents first. He looked for the tall, gray-bearded man sitting beside them. Judge Elias Thorne stood and applauded. He was older now, his movements a little slower, but his presence remained commanding. Beside him sat Dominic Vale, smiling like a proud uncle. Jamal raised his diploma toward them. It was a silent acknowledgement. "You gave me this chance." After the ceremony, amidst the chaos of flying caps and flashing cameras, Jamal found Thorne. "You made it," Thorne said. "Magna cum laude, not bad for a guy with a rap sheet." "Expunged rap sheet," Thorne corrected with a smile. "You are a free man, Jamal, in every sense of the word." "I got a job offer," Jamal said. "A civil engineering firm in Seattle. They know about the past. They said they admire the resilience." "Take it," Thorne said. "Go build your bridges." Far south, in the sterile concrete belly of the USP Marion Federal Penitentiary, Colton Briggs sat in the solitary recreation yard. He looked years older. The weight he had carried as a street-hardened cop had turned to flab. His hair was gone. His skin was pasty from lack of sun. Prison is hard for anyone. For an ex-cop, it is hell. Briggs was in protective custody, which meant he was isolated from the general population for his own safety. If he walked the main yard, he would be dead quickly. The gangs he had tormented, the men he had framed, their cousins and brothers were waiting. He spent hours a day in a small cell. He had no friends. The guards despised him because he made their jobs harder. The inmates hated him because of what he represented. He received one letter a year. It was from the Thorne Ellis Justice Initiative. It was a form letter, an update on the cases they had overturned using his own scoreboard ledger as evidence. "Dear Mr. Briggs, We are pleased to inform you that the conviction of Marcus Tate has been vacated due to evidence of misconduct in your files. Mr. Tate is now home with his family. Sincerely, the Justice Initiative. Briggs crumpled the letter in his fist. He was the architect of his own purgatory. He had wanted to be a legend on the streets. Now he was just a cautionary tale we told to rookies at the academy. Don't be a Briggs. Thorne sat in his new office at the Dirksen building. He had been confirmed to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals after the trial. The controversy hadn't sunk him. It had elevated him. He was seen as the ultimate arbiter of fairness, a man who had seen the system from both the bench and the back of a squad car. He looked out the window at the Chicago skyline, the same gray and orange watercolor he had seen that night in the rearview mirror. His phone buzzed. It was Harper Quinn. She wasn't a rookie anymore. She was a detective now, working in internal affairs. She had almost quit the force after the trial, but Thorne had convinced her to stay. The system doesn't need fewer cops, he had told her. It needs better ones. Be the cop you wanted to be that night. Judge? Quinn's voice came through. We just wrapped up the investigation on the 11th District Narcotics Unit. More indictments coming down tomorrow. The Briggs culture is getting cleaned out. Good work, detective, Thorne said. Keep digging. He hung up and packed his briefcase. He walked out of his chambers, his robe hanging on the hook behind the door. He took the elevator down to the garage. The Genesis G90 was parked in his spot. It was pristine. He unlocked it, slid into the driver's seat, and turned on the engine. The silence was perfect. He pulled out onto the street. It was raining again. Thorne checked his speedometer, 35 in a 35. He checked his mirrors. He saw a patrol car behind him. His heart rate didn't spike. His hands didn't sweat. He knew the law. He knew his rights. And more importantly, he knew that he had forced the city to respect them. He signaled, turned right, and drove home to his wife. The nightmare was over, but the watch continued. And that is the story of how one corrupt officer picked the wrong victim and brought an entire corrupt system crashing down. Officer Briggs thought he was the law, but he forgot that the law is a shield for the innocent, not a weapon for the powerful. Judge Thorne didn't just win his freedom. He used his power to free dozens of others who didn't have a voice. It's a stark reminder that justice isn't given. It's fought for. What would you have done if you were in the judge's seat? Would you have taken the settlement money and walked away? Or would you have fought for the others? Let me know in the comments below if this story of justice served cold moved you. Please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another story about true crime, karma, and the pursuit of justice.